Good morning, biology students. It's Mr. Olson. Today's April 20th. We had just finished our little taxonomy kind of subunit there. We're going to get into our last unit of biology, which is on biomes and human impact. Okay, so we're going to start with biomes and look at climate a little bit. Your assignment this week, listed here, climate and biomes assignment. You are going to need the book as well as potentially the notes. And I'm going to make a video explaining these notes a little bit as well, so that helps you out, okay? And so you're going to use your book, notes, and video to complete the assignment. It's going to be due Friday, and then you'll have a little quiz at the end, just making sure you're okay with biomes. Again, this is not the entire unit. It's just the first part of the unit, which is on biomes, okay? So now let's take a look at your notes a little bit. I want to talk about those. So as we start looking at ecology, um, we want to talk about, we want to look at and talk about some of the important things with ecology. Ecology is really all about relationships, interactions. Okay, so if you keep that in mind as you look at this unit, it's all about relationships and interactions. Then I think you'll be okay. All right. So some of this stuff should be a review for you. You've probably heard of a lot of this information before, but we might be going a little bit deeper than what you've learned in the past. Okay. And so to begin our ecology unit, we're going to be looking at what is ecology. Okay. So we can break eco down. Eco is actually a Latin word. It means house. Okay, Greek or Latin word means house or where you live. And ology is the study of. So ecology really is the study of where you live. It's a study of your house. Okay, we're going to be looking at two things within ecology. We're going to be looking at within the environment and the relationships of the organisms in that environment. So we're looking at the environment of where things live and the relationships of the living things in that environment. Okay, there is some basic terminology we have to get down. Okay, if you ever hear me use the word biosphere, it's just the part of the earth that supports life. And that includes two things. And these are the really important things I think to begin with. We have biotic factors and abiotic factors. Biotic factors are living parts of the environment. So things like plants, animals, the bacteria in the soil, those kinds of things. Those are all living parts of the environment that have an impact on an ecosystem. Okay. But there are also non-living parts of the environment, these abiotic factors, okay, that have an impact on the environment. What are some non-living things that impact an environment? Well, things like, rainfall, right? Water is not alive, but it has a huge impact on living things, right? Temperature, also not alive, but has a huge impact on living things, okay? So we have living parts of the environment and non-living parts of the environment, right? Soil, well, the minerals in the soil are not alive, right? But if you don't have nitrogen in the soil, that definitely has an impact on plant growth, which is alive. And so these biotic and abiotic factors have a huge impact on an ecosystem. Okay, and so you'll also have to weave these into your final presentation as well. We've been kind of putting a pause on your final project over your animal. We're going to come back to that now that we're learning about biomes and ecology. Okay, this is going to be a huge part of your final project. Okay. Um, Ecology is kind of layered. It's broken up into different levels. Those are the six levels. You have just an individual organism, right? You can have a population of individuals, right? So you can look at populations. You can study communities, different populations interacting together. An ecosystem is just a community, and all those populations and abiotic factors weaved in together. So you're looking at a community, all those different populations, and then the abiotic factors. So we really aren't studying, rainfall, temperature, things like that until you get to like an ecosystem. Okay, that's when you start to really factor those in. Then you have a biome and then the biosphere again, which is really just the part of Earth that supports life. So you can look at things from a very small level and then step back and look at things from a very broad level. Okay, when we look at biomes, there's really two factors that control biome characteristics: temperature and precipitation. Okay, so this little graphic here is just showing you um, annual average temperatures in different parts of the world. You'll notice that red indicates hot, and then kind of this bluish to purplish to white indicates cold. And it makes sense that we're hottest at the equator, right? You guys know that. We're warmest at the equator. The sunlight is most direct right here and most concentrated right here. on the planet, and so this tends to get the hottest. And as you move away from the equator, it gets cooler, right? I think you guys know that, right? But what's interesting is that you kind of get this mirroring effect. You get sort of this dark red zone across the equator where it's warmest, and then it moves into like an orangish area, and that orange area mirrors down here. Then you get sort of this yellow band, which is a little bit cooler, and that mirrors up here. There's your yellow band up here. Then you sort of get this teal or aqua area here that's mirrored down here, and then blue, so on and so forth. Okay, so as you get on either side of the equator, a certain distance, biomes start to mirror each other because biomes are dictated by temperature and precipitation. Okay, and we tend to, these go hand in hand, right? Temperature oftentimes has an impact on precipitation, which can be, water of any sort, rain, snow, anything like that. And precipitation oftentimes has an impact on temperature. Okay. Um, so let's look at a map of biomes here. Okay. These are the different terrestrial or land biomes. Like we said, you get this mirroring effect. Here's your equator. We tend to see this one, tropical rainforest at the equator. Okay. And then you get this mirroring effect. You get tropical dry forest in purple on either side. And then below that, you get sort of this orange zone. Okay. That's a tropical savanna. So think of like the plains of Africa. You get that on either side. Okay. And then you get sort of this desert effect. And we tend to see deserts, um, Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, at these certain latitudes, we get deserts. You can kind of see here. Anytime you get a big landmass and you get sort of in these sweet spots here on either side of the equator, you tend to see a desert starting to happen. Okay, and there's other factors obviously because you get a desert up here, but there's other factors that factor in there. But I think the big thing here is notice that mirroring effect. Temperature and precipitation determines which of these biomes you're going to get. Okay, so let's look at some of those. All right. Um, when you study biomes, oftentimes you'll see what are called climate diagrams accompanying them. What is a climate diagram? It essentially just shows you the temperature and precipitation. Okay, here's our temperature in Celsius. We go from -20 all the way up to 40 degrees Celsius. Okay, so 40 degrees Celsius is really, really hot. -20 degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius is really cold. Okay, and water freezes at 0 Celsius. You guys know that. Okay. And then we also have precipitation. Remember, those are the two factors in millimeters. Okay. 80 millimeters, that's like the height of your phone. Okay. 8 centimeters or 80 millimeters. 80 millimeters is 8 centimeters. Okay. That's maybe the height of your phone. That's not very big. Okay. And so you get it plotted by month. Here's January, February, March, April, all the way down. Okay. So what are some things that you can tell looking at this? One, right, you plot out temperature in red here. Temperature is almost always in red. Okay. Make sure you're looking at this side to look at temperature. It is hottest in July, right? But stays pretty warm from, I would say, April all the way to October. Okay, so this is the warmest time of the year for this climate diagram. It's also when you receive the most precipitation, right? It peaks over here in August. You get less precipitation during February, March, and then towards the end of the year as well, right? So in this case, your warmest months are also when you get the most precipitation. Okay, you can look at things even further, right? This is a climate diagram as well for New Delhi, India. Okay, they actually give you the temperature and precip over here. Here's your months plotted out. They give you averages, which is sometimes helpful. And you'll notice a couple things here. We're still getting warm. April, May, June, July, August, September. We taper off October, November, December. And then we get really not a lot of moisture during January through April, and then you get into May, June. May to June is quite the jump, right? June, July, August, and September. We are very, very wet here in this area, right? This is a rainy season in New Delhi, okay? So this blue right here, this light blue indicates that you're humid or you have proper amounts of precipitation for that ecosystem. That the dark blue indicates an excess. Okay, so we get an excess of water during this time, and then we do not get it down here. We get sort of this yellow area, and I always think it kind of looks like the color of sand. This does indicate sort of a drought effect. It means it's dry during this time. So you really don't get like what you do here, which is just normal amounts of rainfall, where you just kind of stay um, consistent with temperature. As temperature goes up, so does precip here. So you really don't get a dry effect or an excess of water effect. You don't get that overly wet effect either, an excess of water. Here you get extremes. You get really no precip or almost no precipitation, and then you get excess. So you kind of get this extreme environment here in New Delhi, India. Um, and if you ever seen a documentary, you know that they have the monsoon season there, and it's a big deal. Okay. Um, you look at this climate diagram for Central Africa, and you notice that wow, a couple things have changed. Your temperature line is still plotted out as a line plot, but now your precip is a bar graph. Okay, so we go from two line plots to a line plot and a bar graph here, and this is how your book shows them. You'll see them both ways. It just depends on what you're looking at, but you'll see in this case our temperature is really constant throughout the year, right? It doesn't vary by more than a couple degrees. We're sitting at between 20 and 30 degrees Celsius. 25 degrees C is around 77 Fahrenheit. So really, really comfortable temperature year round. Okay. And what you notice is, drier January, February, November, December, and then you get just an excess of water from May, June, July, August, September, October. The other thing to note here is we're still in millimeters, but our our numbers have changed. Our quantities on this y-axis have changed. We're up to 300 millimeters, right? And that's almost what we got in the month of August here in this area. So 300 millimeters, that's 30 centimeters. That's basically a third of a yardstick, okay? And so that's quite a bit of water in 1 month, right? So you're getting lots of water here. This would be like what a climate diagram looks like for a tropical rainforest. You kind of get this same sort of pattern where you have lots and lots of water. Your water bar or your water line, just depends on what you're looking at, is really, really far above your temperature plot. And close to the equator, where we see tropical rainforests, the temperature doesn't vary hardly at all. It's very stable temperature wise, and life tends to prefer that temperature stability. Okay, and so kind of saw a few different climate diagrams here. Oftentimes you can look at a climate diagram, not even know where you're at, and figure out what biome you're in just based on your temperature and precipitation data. Okay, but coming back to our plot here, we have 300 millimeters as our max. You go back here, 80 millimeters is your max, right? So just be mindful of what these say. Usually it'll be Celsius in either centimeters or millimeters, but just be mindful of what they actually have as their indicators on those sides, okay? Sometimes like this one, the top is around 80 millimeters. Here it's around 300. Notice 80 is way down here, and here's 300 and here's 80. Okay, so just be careful with those things. But that's climate diagrams. I do ask you to look at a few climate diagrams and interpret those. Here's the last one I want you to look at. You'll notice something different here. Um, your temperature and precip is basically inverted. You go back here, you see these hills, right? You see everything peaking during what we think of as summer months, right? Temperature peaks during what we call summer months, and so does precip, right? That's pretty indicative of what we see here in South Dakota. Um, Here in Australia, you see temperature actually create sort of this valley effect if you plot it out, right? You get cooler May, June, July, August, and your precipitation actually is lowest May, June, July, August. Okay, so you get sort of this valley effect. This indicates that you're in the southern hemisphere. Okay, anytime you see this valley sort of plot, both in your temperature and precip, that indicates that you're in the southern hemisphere. And you guys know that their seasons are inverted, right? In Australia, they're just coming out of their summer, um, and they're going to be entering their fall and winter here very soon. Okay, and you can kind of see that looking at those things. So make sure you note that. You can also tell northern or southern hemisphere whether you get the hill effect or the valley effect. Okay. The biomes we're looking at are listed here: deserts, grasslands. There's different types. There's temperate grasslands where we live, and then savanna grasslands in Africa. And there's slight differences between the two. Chaparral, it's kind of the shrubbery type zone that's dry. California, we tend to see chaparral, and then the Mediterranean. Forest, we're going to break those down into tropical rainforests, tropical dry forests, temperate forests, and then boreal forests or taiga. You may have heard of that before, and then tundra and mountains. Okay. The other thing is soil. Soil is a big factor here. You're going to hear me refer to soil. This kind of gives you the different layers of soil. You've heard of topsoil before. Topsoil oftentimes has this humus layer. It's made of basically dead and decaying plant material. Is this humus layer? It's really, really nutrient rich. Topsoil is a mixture of that humus layer and then some, other soil parts that, minerals and things like that in there as well. Okay, you get to some of these lower levels. This is called the A horizon, the B horizon. Your nutrients oftentimes doesn't get all the way down here, and eventually you get down to bedrock. Okay, kind of the rule of thumb is the more of topsoil and humus that you have, dead and decaying plant material, the more nutrient rich your soil is going to be. Okay, so keep that in mind. Um, every single biome that we're looking at, you're going to see a couple things. I like to have what their average precipitation is. Notice it's in centimeters, also temperature range. Celsius is kind of hard to make sense of, so I put it in Fahrenheit for you. Your high temperature in this area is anywhere between 20 degrees Celsius and 49 degrees Celsius, and then lows are -18 down to a 10, right? Anywhere between -18 and 10, okay? So I kind of just lumped these together, made it easier, threw it in Fahrenheit, and said deserts can get as cold as -2 degrees Fahrenheit all the way up to 120 for temperatures, right? Those are pretty um, normal things that you can see in a desert. I think people tend to think of deserts being hot. There are cold deserts, like the Gobi Desert in Mongolia is a cold desert. It snows there. Desert means dry. It doesn't necessarily mean hot. Okay, most deserts are hot, but there are some cold ones. All right. You also get a lay of the land in terms of plant species, cactus, Joshua trees, different succulents, and animals, things like lizards, bobcats, tortoises, things like that. And obviously, there's more plants and more animals, and they vary based on your biome and your region of your biome. So not every desert has the exact same plant and animal life around the world. Okay. Geographic location, and then also the abiotic factors, varying temperatures, low rainfall. I also throw in a picture of what that biome looks like, and then some important information looking at just general things I wanted to highlight. Okay. Geography, you find them pretty much 30 degrees north and south of the equator. They're often in the center of large continents. Okay. The soil's not very good, right? There's no O horizon, that organic plant material. There's no O horizon, no humus layer. And that's because there's no plants. If you really don't have very many plants, you're not going to get dead and decaying plant material, right? Human influences. How are we influencing this biome? We do a lot of off-roading, causes erosion, things like that. There's also water shortages in these areas, obviously. Um, right? We talked about they can be hot or cold. Desert just means dry and susceptible to flash flooding. You've probably heard of that before, that there's these flash floods in deserts. Vegetation often slows down water when it rains. There's not a lot of vegetation, so the water just runs right down the hillsides into these valleys and creates flash floods. Diversity tends to not be very good in these biomes. And then deserts have extreme night and day temperatures. Why? Um, there's no humidity in the air, right? Humidity, water tends to hold the heat at night very well. If you've ever lived in a really humid environment, you know that, like in the South or something like that, if you have a lot of humidity in the air, it stays really warm and muggy at night. It's really not very comfortable. Deserts don't have that, and so as the sun goes down, so does the temperature. You've heard of people potentially freezing to death in deserts at night. You know sunburn during the day and then freeze at night. That stuff happens, and it's because there's no precipitation, no humidity in the air to hold that heat once the sun goes down. We kind of see our look at our climate diagrams here. You're in Yuma, Arizona. We're in Chad and in Mongolia. We see this really, really dry effect. You can kind of see that sandy tan color there. Temperatures are hot. Precip is low. This is what we tend to see for desert biomes, right? These are the climate diagrams that are pretty characteristic of those areas. A little more precip here, but definitely a lot of drought. Okay. Temperate grassland. This is like where we live. If you live in South Dakota, you know we can get quite cold to really, really hot during the summer. Temperatures can swing quite a bit. Um, grasses, dominate this area. You can look at your animal list here. You'll recognize a lot of those as things that we have. Some grasslands get much colder than what we get to. We tend not to get quite this cold, but some can get colder. Summers are hot, winters are cold. We know that. If you live in South Dakota, you know that summers are hot, winters are cold. We get pretty moderate rainfall and then fire. Fire is always a factor, right? We know that. So you find them pretty much on every continent, right? This looks like, if you just get 5 miles outside of Rapid City going towards Box Elder, this is kind of what it looks like, right? These temperate grasslands, great for grazing and raising cattle. These grasses are annual, meaning they live and die. They grow every year and then they die. And those grasses from living and dying every year, they tend to form this really thick dead plant material organic horizon on the top in the soil, right, which creates really rich soil. And if you live in the Midwest, you know that we grow a lot of crops here. Farming's a big deal, right? They're found all over, like we said. Really rich O horizon, great for growing things, human influence. We know those, like we farm and have a lot of agriculture in these areas. We know that. And then we do experience occasional drought, and if overgrazed, can create desert-like conditions. You go back to the Dust Bowl in the dirty 30s. That was a huge factor. We got quite dry, and then there was a lot of grazing issues, and it created those sort of issues. Okay. Precipitation occurs most in the summer months. We know that we get a lot of our precip during the summer. Here's climate diagrams. Here's Kansas, right? Notice that you tend to just stay pretty consistent. You're not getting an excess of water. You're not getting a lack of water. Um, it stays pretty consistent, which is what you'd hope for. Okay. We do get a little bit of a drying effect here. You can see where your temperatures get a little high, your precip gets a little low, and you get sort of that drought effect. Okay. But temperate grasslands, if you want to look at one, drive east going towards Sioux Falls and you'll see it. Okay. Tropical savanna, I'm going to let you guys start to look through these. I'm not going to go through each one of those. The only thing I want to say, these acacia trees are pretty characteristic of tropical savanna. Some things you'll notice, they do experience intense wet and dry seasons. Um, uh, if you look at a climate diagram, same thing here. You get sort of this really, really dry effect happening, and then you just get a wall of water for 2 months, right? You get a very wet season and then a very dry season, sort of those extremes. Okay. Chaparral, this is what it looks like. You go to California, um, you know, you can go there. The temperatures are really mild because mild winters and warm summers. People like to live in chaparral environments. They're really, really ideal for human beings in terms of nice climate, enjoyable weather. But you often lead to fire. How many times do you see fires happening in California? It's pretty constant, right? Tropical rainforest. The only thing I want to say here with tropical rainforest that is probably something that you haven't heard of is the soil actually is not very good in the tropical rainforest. They don't have a thick O horizon, that organic plant material horizon of in the soil. Because there is so much rain. You go look at the climate diagrams. I mean, it's just constant rain year round. Um, every single month. We're looking at in Malaysia here, 300 millimeters or 30 centimeters a month. It just rains constantly and you get an excess of water. Well, what that does is it washes all the nutrients out of the soil. Okay. And so, because of that, we call that leaching. And because of that, we tend to get actually nutrient poor soil. Our soil is much better here in the Midwest than it is in the rainforest. And that's because they experience so much nutrient leaching out of the soil. Okay. Um, we're starting to log these areas, which is obviously not great, but there's a need for lumber products, and so um, I think that probably isn't going away. But I think there's hopefully they do it in a conscious manner. Um, Constant warm temperatures and constant light rainfall make great growing conditions, right? Plants don't have to live and die; they can just live year round because they don't have to worry about winter. They don't have to worry about freezing temperatures. It stays very nice. We call the rainforest a major carbon sink. Those plants suck CO2 out of the atmosphere, which is a big deal. That's the only way that we can really get carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. You guys know carbon dioxide probably is a greenhouse gas. You probably know that. Um, and so the rainforests are important for sucking that carbon out of the atmosphere. Okay. Um, Tropical dry forest, I'll let you read up on that. If you've ever been to Mexico, that's a good indicator of tropical dry forest. Temperate forest, these are, places where the leaves change color in the fall. That's a a temperate forest. I'll let you read through some of that there. Boreal forest, we're getting further north. You'll notice here we're all the way up in the upper forests in Russia and Canada. I'll let you read through some of that. We can get really cold, obviously. That's what it looks like. Just vast, vast expanses of coniferous trees, things like pine trees and spruces. I think one thing that people don't think about with these boreal forests is they're a major carbon sink. They remove CO2 and store it in plant tissue. That is a huge deal. As you look at, the boreal forest of Russia, I mean, this thing is huge. I mean, it expands further than what I guess the United States does. Look how big that is, right? You have forests of pine trees and spruce trees that would cover the entire U.S., right? The rainforests down here tend to get all the credit for helping pull carbon out of the atmosphere, but these boreal forests are a major carbon sink as well. Okay. Tundra, only things to note here. The tundra, obviously cold, you get this permafrost layer. You don't see any trees here. Everything is low lying. It's trying to stay out of the wind and the cold, so things tend to stay close to the ground. And it's really hard to develop deeper root systems. That permafrost layer prevents you from getting roots down very far. Okay. And you notice we're at the top here. Mountains, the one thing I want to say about that, they kind of create their own sort of unique little biome. Mountains are found all over the world. Plant and animal species vary obviously a lot, but you get that rain shadow effect. And so that has this kind of unique sort of effect on mountainous areas. Okay. Aquatic biomes, I'm going to let you guys look through those. We're not going to focus as much on those. Um, but I think it's important to have some recognition here. We might address these later, but right now I really just want you focusing on terrestrial biomes, okay? And so as you get to the end of this, also note some of the influences on these aquatic biomes, okay? We tend to impact rivers, lakes, and streams, oceans, swamps, marshes, those kinds of things, a variety of ways. So make sure that you just peek at this quick. I think this is helpful for you to look at. But again, as you go through and look at your assignment, okay, use these notes to help you. I've tried to lay it out pretty well. I explained climate diagrams a little bit to you. Um, let's maybe peek at your assignment quickly and what I'm asking you to do. You'll go through many of these questions come out of the book. Make sure you open that, okay? You'll also want to be looking at your notes. And then you're going to get towards the end here, and you have to click on a couple links. This first one is building some biomes. You have to go through and actually build some biomes. We'll give it a second to load here, if it will load. There we go. So you're going to go down and build some different biomes, just kind of giving you an overview. Make sure you understand the general sort of features of some of the biomes we've been talking about. Click play. And then I would start here and work your way across, okay? So we'll start with like tundra, kind of gives you an idea of where to find tundra, some features of the tundra. Make sure you look at that. And then also you're going to want to go through and build it. So you'll click on and figure out what plants would you find in the tundra. You probably wouldn't find um, vines, water tolerant trees and plants. You probably wouldn't find cactus in the tundra. If you click on cactus, it'll say incorrect. You wouldn't find those there. They need warmer temperatures. So maybe you click on moss, lichen, grasses, and low woody shrubs, and it says correct. Click next. You'll go through that, and then eventually you're just going to go down and give you all your postcards When you are all done, it's going to pop a certificate up here. Make sure that you take a screenshot of that certificate, and that's what you're going to post right in here, okay? And then down here, you're going to have to go through and analyze some climate diagrams, okay? So we're going to open this hyperlink. It's going to take us to um, climatecharts.net, okay? And this is really, really cool. It basically gives you climate data for really places all over the globe, okay? So if you wanted to click on something like, so if you look in here, click on this guy. We're in Cameroon. Um, you can click. I tend to prefer this type of climate diagram. I don't know, I just like them better. If you like these better, fine, but it's easier for my eyeballs to make sense of when it's like this, okay? So as you look at this climate diagram, you'll notice we have an excess of water here. Not as much here, but temperatures are pretty constant. Anytime you see this temperature line stay constant and you have 6, 7 months of rain, you're looking at tropical rainforest. And if you look at that, look how close to the equator we are here. Um, we're definitely in tropical rainforest here in Cameroon. Okay. And so this is just going to give you climate data over several. They basically take an average over several years. Here's your year. You can reduce this down if you want to. I wouldn't worry about that. But I want you to take a screenshot of this, and I want you to analyze this climate diagram. Hopefully, you're talking about what you're noticing for temperature, what you're noticing for water, and things like that. You might want to leave it like this, and talk about we're quite, somewhat dry January, February, and then into December, and then we have an excess of water the rest of the year, kind of this extreme sort of situation. Okay, it's up to you. Whatever you want to do, you can click back and forth there, whatever you decide. If you go to the search bar on a computer, you can find the snipping tool. If you just type in snip, click snip, and then click new, you can basically cut and paste just this little diagram, right? Click copy, and then you can go to your assignment and you can paste it. Right? I went and did one for you. You have 3 more to do here. Paste your climate diagram here and then discuss what biome you think it is based on the climate diagram and what you're seeing, and then discuss some of the characteristics happening in that biome like I did here, okay? So once you've gone through and used your book to answer those questions, as well as the notes and anything from the video, go through those 2 websites, and then when you're done, just make sure you submit it and you're good to go. We'll have a quiz on Friday over biomes. Um, it'll be similar in length to what you saw with the taxonomy quiz, and then we'll keep moving forward. Okay, we haven't really talked about relationships yet. We're really just looking at climate and biomes right now. Okay, good luck. If you have questions, make sure that you communicate with me.